Yeah.
Good morning to you, Chief Constable, and your senior team, and also to those in the room. Also, a good morning to those watching online. Thank you for your interest in policing. You're all very welcome to this March accountability meeting in public. Today, I'm also very pleased to welcome a visiting delegation from Ukraine who are here to learn about oversight and accountability in Northern Ireland. I extend a very warm Northern Ireland welcome to you all. Chief Constable, thank you for your accountability report, and we will have a range of questions for you. And prior to that, I have a few issues that I would like to talk about. I want to start with recruitment and representativeness. And following discussions here at this meeting last month, a breakdown of the figures for application numbers around the latest recruitment competition have now been published. The fact that levels of Catholic applicants was just 26.7% has been the focus of many discussions. There's nobody around this table who doesn't want a service that is fully representative of the community that the PSNI serves. And we know that there are many contributory factors that influence those considering a career in policing. It's not a 9-to-5 job, and it is very challenging in many ways. I certainly couldn't do it. In relation to the figures, as I said in the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee last week, we must all revisit what Patton said 25 years ago. And that was to take steps to remove any discouragements to members of our communities applying to join the police and to make it a priority to encourage them to apply. While on the subject of recruitment, can I say at the attestation event last Friday, it was incredible to see the increased numbers of new officers coming through as part of the recovery plan. Since our last meeting, there have been a number of significant reports published, including the Sagini report on child criminal exploitation and OPONI's publication of the abuse of position report for sexual purposes by PSNI officers this week, which makes disturbing reading. Chief Constable, you and the leadership team have made it very clear to the organisation that there will be zero tolerance of police officers and police staff who abuse their positions or abuse their powers. We know that following the 2025 report by the Criminal Justice Inspector, a series of actions have been taken by PSNI and reported to the board on work undertaken to strengthen all of your internal policies. Vetting, resourcing of professional standards have all been strengthened. However, we know and recognise that legislative amendment is also needed to enable swifter disciplinary action to be taken by the PSNI. We are now at the final stages of a revised code of ethics for the PSNI, which makes it explicitly clear that police officers shall not establish or continue a sexual or improper relationship with any victim, with any witness, suspect, detained person or defendant arising from their duties. Any abuse of power is wholly unacceptable, and as a board, we would encourage anyone who has been a victim to report it to the Police Ombudsman's Office. This is deeply damaging to public confidence in policing, and it is an area where we will maintain focus. And can I also say that the actions of individuals does a great disservice to all of the officers and staff who are committed to doing their job to the highest standards every day. During recent visits to meet officers and staff at Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon District and the Air Support Unit, we met people who were committed to making our community safer. And at the recent Problem Solving Awards, I, along with a number of members of this board, heard about the exceptional work across Northern Ireland and heard of projects that without a doubt have made significant positive impacts on people's lives. By working with communities and partner agencies to address and resolve problems, all of these projects are making a difference. On behalf of the board, I would like to record thanks for the outstanding efforts of police officers, police staff, and PCSPs, and all those who work with and within policing to make Northern Ireland a safer and a better place to live. In this National Police Staff Week of celebration and recognition, can I also record our thanks for the work staff play in a range of roles that support the police service delivery. And congratulations to all the officers and staff recognised at the Blue Lights Awards, including ACC Beck. Well done, Davy. I would also like to congratulate award recipients from other Blue Light services. It is important to recognise that you all work together for public safety. Chief Constable, over to you if you have any opening comments, and then we'll move to questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members, and everyone in the room, and of course those watching online. I think I just want to begin. You mentioned we have a delegation of colleagues from Ukraine. Yesterday, there was further tragic loss of life in Ukraine, including police officers, and I just wanted to acknowledge that loss. Also, I was handed a letter a moment ago by Susie, whose husband tragically died through suicide, and I just want to acknowledge Susie being here today as well, who I've been in contact with and intend to meet as soon as she feels able to speak to me about what happened. The welfare, the well-being of police officers and police staff, because of what we endure, whether it's here or elsewhere, because of the pressures on policing. Especially today, I think. I've been in this job for well over 40 years now. Seems to be more prevalent and more challenging than they've ever been. So I just wanted to make those acknowledgements. As far as my opening remarks, Chair, February was another busy month for the police service. There was a range of issues I want to highlight. I'd like to begin with some positive developments and statistics that are contained in this month's accountability report. In the 12 months to the 31st of January, recorded crime in Northern Ireland fell to its lowest level since we started recording data some 28 years ago. In the same period, antisocial behaviour, so often a real blight on communities and families, remains at one of the lowest levels since 2006. This performance is remarkable, particularly in the face of the resourcing pressure we faced over this period. It's a reflection of the problem solving that we are delivering every day in our communities. It's a reflection on who the PSNI are. However, there's significant work to do and we're not complacent. Worryingly, very worryingly, race hate crime continues to rise and far too many families have lost loved ones on our roads. The tragic frequency of road deaths has to be a focus for us all. We've suffered 15 deaths on our roads so far this year. I know my thoughts and everybody in this room will go with the families impacted. We collectively need to do more to keep our roads safer. We should celebrate that Northern Ireland is regarded as one of the safest places to live in the United Kingdom. However, I do always remind this board and others that whilst these traditional crime recording figures are important, crime is changing. It's perpetrated routinely online, and predatory and criminal behaviours occur through the internet more and more. The volume and seriousness of online offending causes me huge concerns. We are pivoting our policing response, and that's why I'm delighted with the advancement of our digital forensics capability within the PSNI, which is there to tackle just such offending. This was a matter I've previously spoken about together with Commissioner Justin Kelly of Angarna in particular regard to ransomware and phishing attacks committed online and the exploitation of our vulnerable in the communities. Last November, we jointly delivered the George Quigley Memorial Lecture at Queen's University on combating economic crime. And earlier this week, we held a joint conference with Angarna entitled One Threat, Shared Responsibility to tackle serious and organised crime. We had many partners at the event. Over 2 productive days, we discussed ways to improve further how we respond to threats from organised crime gangs. The relationship between the PSNI and Angarna is incredibly good and ensures criminals are less able to exploit jurisdictional and border challenges. We should not take that relationship for granted. It is really unique within policing. This month's accountability report sets out some of the outstanding police work being delivered. It demonstrates the sustained focus and success in tackling organised crime, disrupting drug supply, and protecting those most vulnerable to violence and exploitation. Detectives, local policing teams have dismantled organised crime groups across the country, while our public protection branch and neighbourhood policing teams have strengthened safeguarding interventions and hosted events designed to improve accessibility and trust within key groups. This commitment to saving lives was best exemplified in the actions of officers who administered CPR to a 6-year-old child in cardiac arrest. They kept the child alive until ambulance crews arrived. The officer's intervention was instrumental to the child's survival. We should be incredibly proud of what our people do every day. It was therefore no surprise at all to see a strong PSNI representation at this year's Blue Lights Awards, which you've mentioned, Chair, which celebrated the extraordinary achievements, dedication and courage of Northern Ireland's emergency services. I want to take this opportunity to extend special congratulations to all of the winners. The rewards remind us that policing is about making a positive difference to people's lives. And on the 19th of February, we hosted our own internal problem-solving awards, where we recognise the innovation and evidence-based initiatives that are delivering tangible results for our local communities, addressing the issues that matter most to those communities. I'm very grateful for the many board members who attended and presented awards. Interestingly, Sylvia Chenery, a criminologist and regarded as the national problem-solving expert, was a guest at those awards. She pulled me to one side and told me that the PSNI excels in this area nationally. She was gushing in her praise of the innovation, collaboration and energy of our staff in addressing the underlying causes of crime and disorder. She said we should be very proud of what we're achieving here. Our workforce is undoubtedly our greatest asset. I was also delighted to host the latest in our long service and good conduct award ceremonies for 40 members of staff and their families. It's vital that through these awards and ceremonies that we undertake, that we continue to recognise the dedication and commitment of colleagues whose professionalism represents public service at its very best. I was delighted by the strong response to our recent recruitment campaign. February saw the first attestation, as you mentioned, Chair, of student officers progressing through our expanded intake of 51 recruits. These larger intakes will begin to strengthen operational capacity and resilience across districts in the months ahead. I wish each of our applicants and our new officers every success as they embark on an incredibly demanding but deeply deeply rewarding career. There has been recent political debate about the recruitment campaign and particularly the number of applicants from a Catholic background. I'm actually delighted that we as a society are beginning to discuss recruitment and the challenges of building a police service reflective of all communities in Northern Ireland. As we move through this, the PSNI's 25th year, our anniversary year, we must have this debate. We must explore how to collectively increase the number of applicants from all of those groups currently underrepresented in the PSNI. There are clear challenges facing some of those considering a career in policing. We need to see open, constructive conversations about how we overcome any barriers that dissuade people interested in policing as a career from joining. This is a collective responsibility. I absolutely commit to doing what we can in the PSNI, but we need help. We need the help of everyone, as the Patten Commission report strongly recommended. And to remind us all, the Patten report stated, and it's at 15.1 and 15.2, if you care to look at it, and I quote, that the key to making the police service representative of communities, indeed the key to the successful implementation of nearly everything in the report, is that leaders of their communities now actively encourage their young people to apply to join the police service. The report goes on, and everyone should make it a priority to encourage them to apply. The Commission report emphasises, and again I quote, we cannot stress this recommendation too strongly. The report states that leaders, and again quoting the report, should take steps to remove all discouragements to members of their communities applying to join the police service and make it a priority to encourage them to apply. So we must all ensure that the PSNI workforce is more representative of the communities that we serve, and that policing is seen as a normal and valued career choice like education or health or many others. We have to do more collectively as we move further away from the violence of our past. Linked to recruitment and recurring officer numbers is the issue of funding. Although progress has been made, much remains to be done to place policing on a stable financial footing and safeguard our future ability to keep people safe. Our current estimates identify shortfalls of approximately 65 million next year, the year after 96 million, and the year after that 168 million. These figures provide a stark picture of the ongoing funding challenge. Similarly, the indicative capital budget is almost £20 million short of our estimated requirement and £14 million less than this year. Policing has to be supported financially in the same way as health and education has traditionally been. Again, with that background, I welcome the evidence given last month by yourself, Chair, as well as the Vice Chair and Chief Executive to the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, outlining the board's perspectives on police funding, recruitment and service delivery. I'm very grateful for your continued advocacy on behalf of policing in Northern Ireland. While I always praise excellent police work and do everything I can to support the overwhelming majority of officers and staff who serve with integrity and professionalism, I will be relentless in pursuing those whose standards fall far short. I very much welcome and fully support the Police Ombudsman report, analysing and setting out emerging findings of their review of 42 cases of alleged abuse of position for sexual purposes. Any abuse of position for sexual purposes is not simply wholly unacceptable, it's abhorrent. It represents the most egregious breach of trust and a violation of the standards we expect of police officers and staff. I've spoken to this board previously about my specific concerns about misogyny in society and within trusted professions, including policing. I want to reassure this board and everyone watching that we will relentlessly pursue and deal with these people. Our collective commitment as a senior team and as an organisation is for zero tolerance for this type of activity. While the Ombudsman's report identifies serious individual misconduct, importantly, very importantly, it very much recognises the positive strategic direction we have taken and the significant work done to strengthen professional standards, enhance vetting and misconduct reporting processes, and for learning from past failures. I have personally sought out and met a number of female colleagues who were subjected to vile behaviour in the past to hear their experiences. We as an organisation will do everything necessary to deal with such issues. But please remember that the numbers of these officers are numerically incredibly small, albeit any such officer, even one, is unacceptable. The vast majority of our people are amazing and are more disgusted at this behaviour than anyone because it undermines who we are and what we're here to do, to protect society and look after vulnerable people, not exploit them. We will work even harder with the Ombudsman and others, including the independent Langdale review, which was commissioned because of concerns about our societal and organisational response to violence against women and girls and the increase in misogyny, to ensure robust prevention, early identification and decisive action against predatory behaviour. There is no place for these people in the PSNI. We will find them and we will sack them. It's also important to note that most of those cases mentioned in the Ombudsman's report were referred to the Ombudsman by the PSNI. I want to put on record my thanks to the Ombudsman's office for working with us in prioritising this issue. So thank you, Chair, and I'm now happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chief Constable. And before we move to questions, could I say that the thoughts of this board are with all of the victims that you've spoken about and also those bereaved in the tragic car accidents and road accidents that you were referring to in your report. I'm going to move to questions. Could I ask members to be concise and short with your questioning, and equally, Chief Constable, yourself and your team, to respond as quickly as possible because we have a number of questions we need to get through. First question is from Nuala on the Ombudsman's report.
Thank you, Chair, and also want to take the opportunity to pass my condolences to Suzanne, who was here with the Blue Lights team this morning, and my thoughts are with her and her family, especially her young children. I want to speak about the OPONI report into abusive position for sexual purposes. Looking at this, the 42 cases, all of the perpetrators were men, all of the victims were women. One victim was 14. They all had at least one vulnerability, with an average of 6 vulnerabilities for all the victims. There was evidence of targeted exploitation, the use of police systems to actually identify victims, and the use of inappropriate use of police phones, etc., to actually target and identify victims as well. And I know that you said in your response that you will find the police service will take this serious and they will find these officers and dismiss them. I mean, one of these victims was 14. That's not just predatory, it's paedophile as well, a very young child. But can you give an example of everything necessary to actually weed out these people and find out who they are? But also, how did they get through in the first place? How did we not know that these people, this isn't something that is just learned at the average age of 30, as it says in the report, but what is everything necessary? Can you give some examples of changes that you're going to make and how these people actually got through in the first place?
I've got two more questions on the same subject, and then maybe we can respond in wholly on them all. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. And just following on from what Nuala just said, if we can get an understanding of what we're looking at in terms of unacceptable behaviours at probationary period, it is something that was raised by John Beggs. I think it is totally right that it should be raised and highlighted, because he was very clear, particularly in the Wayne Cousins case and a number of other cases, very serious cases where women were murdered, that there were concerning behaviours displayed by those police officers during their probationary period. So an understanding around that. And then just on Op Roric, April 2024 is the last we were sort of updated on that, and we were told that that was ongoing. And I'm just wondering, is that still ongoing? And will we get something in relation to that fairly soon as a board? Thank you.
That's all we have. Go ahead, Chief Constable.
Thank you. So I think what I'm going to undertake to do is give you a written response as well, Nuala, because I think that'll be quite useful for you. Listen, if I'm candid, I've got lots of notes here and things that we're doing, but when I arrived here, I was concerned about the levels of misogyny in society here. And I don't know if that's simply because it's more prevalent here or simply because I've not noticed that prevalence increase generally in society because of the online harms that we see and the way mainly young men are being shown things that nobody should look at through the internet and being developed into people who become bad adults as opposed to good and positive members of the community. We had many conversations about the Katie Simpson case, Nuala, and the behaviours that we saw there with regards to the equine industry and the individual involved in that murder. So since arriving here, I have sought out a number of female colleagues who had raised concerns or been the victim of inappropriate behaviour to get an understanding. Some of that, and the conversations that this board has had with this senior team, is why we commissioned the Langdale review, which I'll come to as well. To give you a sense, though, of what we've done around disciplinary activity against these people. So in 2024, I, as the Chief Constable, chair what are called special case hearings to deal with inappropriate conduct. And they're fast track hearings. They're hearings where there is a very strong and compelling case with regards to inappropriate behaviour. So in 2024, I chaired 11 special case hearings, and they're done by me. 9 of those 11 resulted in dismissal without notice. 1 resulted in a final written warning, and 1 resulted in a reduction in rank. Of those 11 special case hearings in 2024, there was 1 person convicted of misconduct in a public office, having engaged in a sexual relationship with a member of the public who he met on duty. He was dismissed without notice. Because of my concerns and the focus the organisation then placed on these issues, and I want to talk about the Virginia report last March as well, I'll reference that. We saw an increase in 2025 of misogyny with regards to special case hearings, because I think we've been shining a torch on this for the last 2 years. So we had 11 special case hearings in 2025. All of those resulted in dismissal without notice. 6 involved elements of misogyny. 4 in relation to inappropriate messages. 1 involving domestic abuse. And 1 involving 2 counts of sexual assault on a colleague who was a probationer. This year, 2026, I've conducted 2 special case hearings. Both were dismissed without notice. 1 involved domestic abuse and 1 involved an offence of gross indecency towards a child which was a historical allegation against the officer. You mentioned Operation Roric, which, or Linda did, which is the response for the information of those watching online that we as an organisation in the PSNI did in the wake of the Cousins and Carrick outrageous criminal acts. 2 members of the Metropolitan Police, Cousins involved in the murder of Sarah Everard. And I think it's noteworthy that the report from the Ombudsman came out on the 5th anniversary of that unimaginably awful event. And like all police services, the PSNI undertook a review of any allegations of sexual misconduct against its officers and staff. The period for the review of Roric was 2012 to 2022. That resulted in a review of 134 officers over that 10-year period. Through that Roric work, and I will bring Bobby in because he is overseeing it now and give the update that you asked for, Linda. We looked at 56 officers, none of whom remain with the service. 2 actually are now deceased. 37 resigned or retired, and 17 were dismissed or required to resign. We continue to review cases to make sure that our systems are as robust as they possibly can be. And I've made it clear with regards to Team PSNI events that these board members have been at, but also with regards to my speaking to the organisation through the blogs that I do around the unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable nature of anything, not just with regards to the severity of these incidents, but anything with regards to unacceptable behaviour towards colleagues or members of the public. So we are taking a very, very, very robust stance. And a lot of this, I think, there's a collection of work being done at the moment. A lot of this comes from March last year, the report that I mentioned from the Criminal Justice Inspectorate for Northern Ireland, which examined the Ombudsman's response to allegations of abuse of power and our response. I think that's resulted in a number, or in an uplift in the number of referrals to the Ombudsman. So at the moment, we are doing a huge amount. You will also remember in August of 2024, and we spoke to the board about this, again, because of the concerns in some of the behaviours that we've seen, we required all of our officers and staff to commit to a statement of intent with regards to our values and our behaviours. And I can absolutely assure you that this type of behaviour it makes me so angry and the members of this senior team so angry, but I know because of the work that their rank and file do, some of which I described in my opening remarks, this undermines everything we're trying to achieve. It goes to recruitment, it goes to trust and confidence, it goes to reporting. So we will work incredibly closely with the Ombudsman to make sure that, and there will be, I think, almost certainly quite considerably historical cases that will emerge from this work. And I would encourage anyone with any negative experience or any information about any such wrongdoing to please come forward and report it to either ourselves or the Ombudsman so that we can clear house with regards to these behaviours. There is a lot of data with regards to different years and the number of allegations made, referrals made around this. I will do a very detailed written response to the board around that. And I just want to pivot, if I can, to the Langdale review. I know that that wasn't mentioned by either of you, but the Langdale review The commission of it include the examination of our policies and guidance and performance data, including case file sampling and interrogation of recording systems with regards to violence against women and girls, domestic abuse and misogyny. Review of previous inspection reports, national guidance and comparative best practice. Interviews and focus groups with officers and staff across ranks and departments. And I met a number of individuals that I've spoken about who had had historically bad experiences, and all of those female colleagues met with Rachel Langdale to describe their experiences to her. That was one of the reasons that I was determined to bring in Rachel to do the work. Her terms of reference include engagement with victims, advocacy organisations, third sector partners and statutory agencies, and drive consideration of oversight perspectives and all prior recommendations. So there's a huge amount of work that is going on. And the Langdale report was with us in January and February for checking. It will be, we have to go through our governance processes. There are two elements to the report. The section 1 deals with the external element of how we deal with allegations of violence against women and girls and domestic abuse. The second section, Nuala, deals specifically with how we deal with internal allegations against members of our officers and staff. And she makes a number of recommendations and brings together almost an action plan. And we're accepting all those recommendations, which we'll be sharing with you after the Strategic Management Board, which is our own governance structure, that report will go through in the middle of March, in a couple of weeks. And she will return to ensure that we're then implementing the recommendations and the work that she has signposted to us. So there's more, but I'm conscious of time, and I got a warning from the chair not to be too long, but this is such an important issue. I want to absolutely reassure you about what we are doing here. I do just want to bring Bobby in because, particularly on Roric or areas around professional standards, Bobby might wish to provide some additional helpful information just around reassurance. Bobby?
Yeah, thanks, Chief, and I'll keep this brief for you, Chair. So, look, I mean, the bottom line here is we absolutely want and need to be a service that everybody can be proud of, can be proud to be a part of, and crucially as well, can trust. I know in the OPONI report, they talked about this being amongst the most serious corruption threats. This is the biggest single corruption threat in our view, and that's why, as the Chief has said, we've had the Langdale review. It's why this was a focus as well in our inclusion survey, because we don't want there to be any hiding place. We want to shine a light in terms of the internal organisational culture to make sure that our first line of defence within the organisation is colleagues actually reporting any concerns or suspicions that they have in terms of the conduct of others. Because if you think about it, these people are not just going to seek to exploit the vulnerability of people outside the organisation. It'll be demonstrated as well in their behaviour within the workplace as well. I have to say the OPONI report's findings were not a surprise to us. The reason for that is really since that Sejeni inspection, we've been working really closely with OPONI on this, and in fact they had shared much of the emerging findings with us long before it was laid before the executive. The trends as well would mirror what we would see the profile of being in terms of officers of concern. So you're right to say that in the OPONI report, it has been highlighted that it was all male officers. Unfortunately, that is not the position now. We have had incidents of this amongst some of our female officers as well. So we can't assume that this will only be male predatory behaviour, but it is undoubtedly the majority of males who are involved in this when you look at the breakdown of the figures. The Chief touched on a number of things there. We have definitely increased our use of special case hearings, so we are trying to speed up processes linked to misconduct. And actually that is probably one of the key findings, both reflected in the Langdale review, but also from Operation Roric as well, which is in the past people have been able to escape misconduct proceedings by being able to retire or resign. And as I think you'll all know, we've been lobbying alongside the department to try and have the police regulations changed so as we can pursue people after they've been in employment, and we can make sure that hearings can take place so as they can be effectively brought to justice and can be barred from taking any role in policing going forward. I would just want to make a few other points just very briefly. Absolutely agree with Linda. Vetting is actually the first line of defence in terms of stopping these people from getting into the organisation in the first place. Contrary to the pattern and the trend that's been seen concerningly in other parts of the UK, actually our number of vetting refusals has increased in the last 3 to 5 years. So we would point to that as being evidence that we are being more robust in terms of tackling that. Vetting is never foolproof, and it becomes even more challenging when you're talking about young people who will have had less of a profile and a period of time and work and things like that for us to be able to pick up on. You mentioned John Beggs and Regulation 13. We're actually looking to have a trilateral conversation with both the board and the DOJ to see if we can further strengthen the regulations, including Regulation 13, to again speed up that process, because at the minute the only person that can formally sign off on that is the chief. And we think if we could change that, we could potentially accelerate those processes as well. In terms of Operation Roric, then, just to kind of close that out, I received a report on Operation Roric in March of 2025. My big concern with it was that the original terms of reference had largely been restricted to those that were still in the organisation. And I recognise that there was an issue in terms of those that had retired, resigned, even those that had become deceased. And there was a need for us to also do some further work in respect of those individuals to make sure that there were no missed investigative opportunities or no continuing safeguarding concerns. So since March of last year, further work has been done on that remaining cohort of people. We are now in the position where we are ready to report to the board. And in fact, literally by the end of this week, we'll be writing to the chief executive, because I know that there's interest in this across all the committee structures. So rather than just go back to performance committee, we want to make sure that there's visibility across the entire board. And we've had a discussion with the chief exec and the chair about that. So you will be hearing more about that. We will also bring down some of the members of the Roric team to brief the board and give them really the full flavour and context about the work that they did. I mean, in essence, in Roric, there were 5 key thematic areas which we've been working on to try and improve our organisational approach. The first was around investigative rigour. There were issues around intelligence and information sharing, the need for more victim-centric approaches, improved systems and governance, and greater supervision and training. So as they've been going through the review, those learnings have been applied. And again, we'll be in a position to come and give you a more fulsome description of all the work that we've done to make sure that we are as effective as we possibly can be in terms of rooting out this very small number of officers from our ranks, because they have absolutely no place within them.
Thank you. Very quickly.
Yeah, I just appreciate getting a written response to that, for sure. And you made some comments there, and I think it's really important to note as well the work of the board in terms of wanting to shine a light of these cases, and also the issues of misogyny and sexual or abusive position for sexual purposes, because I think it is important that, you know, it didn't happen in a vacuum, that it did happen because of the public scrutiny and because of the death of Sarah Everard as well. It wasn't that it was not dismissing what the police have done, but it wasn't an own police initiative, because it was because of what was happening in the public context as well. And I also want to say that with regards to the changes in regulations since the Katie Simpson case, I have advocated for a change in the law in which misconduct proceedings should be continuing after an officer either retires or resigns. I will be putting an amendment to the Justice Bill forward within that. So if I could get support from the senior leadership team for that to pass through the Assembly, then that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Deirdre, you have an additional request?
Sorry, Bob, and no, Bobby touched on it briefly there, but if in the detailed written response, if you could include, because it would be the concern that before it goes to special case hearings that people do resign and then they may move on, and there are safeguarding issues and vetting issues for other organisations. So if you can include more detail on what work you are doing to try and mitigate against that. And also if you can include, I know you touched on in terms of community stakeholders and changing that culture, because obviously culture is one of the key issues that are driving this. So if we could just get more response, because I know the board want to look at this issue in more detail going forward. Thank you.
Bobby.
I will be very brief, but I mean, it was touched upon both by yourself and the chief in terms of the code of ethics. And us now haven't signed that off officially today, We actually have a stakeholder engagement event next week, which we've organised, which is specifically about going out and explaining why we're making the changes that we're making to the code. It'll probably take 3 to 4 months for us to get the required legislation to actually bring that into force. But we want to be more open, more transparent, and we want to be highlighting the work that we're doing, but also the work that needs to be done to properly strengthen the regime to make it more effective than it currently is.
Okay, thank you. It's reassuring that there's a lot of work being done. And we look forward to the full Langdale report and the written responses. I'm going to ask Brendan now for a question on representativeness and recruitment.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, in your accountability report, you correctly highlight that a representative workforce is fundamental to effective community-focused policing, and you call on leaders and communities to advocate positively for policing as a career. And this obviously is in the context of applicants from the Catholic community being at 27% in the recent recruitment campaign. And you've made reference, and so has the Chair, that this is a challenge that is clearly laid out in patent to political and community leaders. However, Patton also stated, we recommend that liaison be established between all schools and universities and the PSNI immediately, and that work experience attachments and familiarisation days be organised with active support and encouragement. Would you accept that the PSNI has been complacent in responding to that challenge within Patton? And what reassurance can you give in terms of rising to that challenge going forward?
So first,
Sorry,
Oh,
please, I have
sorry.
another couple just for time. Marian has a question on this, and also Colin.
Yeah, and it's just building on what Brendan said there, Chief. Mine would be, following on from Brendan's, back to you as, what would you like to see this board do to help increase representativeness in PSNI, particularly at recruitment phase?
Colin.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, look, at last month's meeting, we discussed the issue of 50-50, and to be fair and honest, I think that Bobby knocked it back a bit quick by sort of saying it was a very rough assessment on recruitment patterns, that it wouldn't work. And I think they just completely lock such an option out without giving it some more thought. Wouldn't have been helpful, because it is a crude tool to try and address the imbalance, but it's also a tool, and it's one that would address it much quicker. So I would just maybe like to get a flavour if it's still something that's on the table from your perspective, or is it something that's completely off the table?
Sorry, one more from Trevor, and then we'll let you respond.
Well, it's maybe a point rather than a question. I actually think, from what it's worth, I actually think the last recruitment campaign has been one of the best that the police have conducted. I think that when you come into Belfast, you couldn't avoid the signage encouraging people to join the police. It didn't define on a religious basis. It was in a simple place in Belfast. When you look at the bridge, the advertising campaign and all of those other things. But some of these questions is actually very interesting, a little bit interesting in terms of the answer, because the police did try to do stuff in schools and they were excluded. So I actually think it's more, and I'll make the same point again, it's about political leadership. I hear what Marian's saying about what the board, I think the board have been very proactive, but I think there's individual political leadership should be shown. And until that happens, we can mess about with 50-50 recruitment, we do all of those things. But if the political leaders don't get behind the recruitment campaigns and endorse this as a career for policing, then it'll never work. So 50-50 has been a recruitment camp in the past, and it'll be the same in the future, and it's positive discrimination to all of those. But I have to commend and welcome the 27% of the Catholic community who had the courage to put their names forward to join the police.
Thank you, Chief Constable.
you want me to be succinct, and I'm going to try to be, but this is such an important issue.
Yeah.
So in response to Brendan, so I can't speak for the full 25 years of what's happened in the PSI, Brendan, but I can tell you the last couple of years, and we weren't recruiting when I arrived. We've been very focused as a senior team, as an organisation, on getting the best possible applicants to apply for this incredible job. Because policing is a role like no other, where you get a chance to protect society. You have an opportunity, conscious of the earlier discussion and the work we're doing to make sure that we address where people have let us down. You are responsible for looking after the vulnerable in society. And almost above even those two issues, you're responsible for creating a better society for the next generation. It's a role that people from every community should want to do. But we are a community that is still emerging from conflict. It is not normal when there's a schools fair that results in a bomb threat because the PSNI are going to be in that schools fair. And I have to say, this was only about a month ago, just at the time of the last board. And that particular school that I'm not going to name were fabulous. And we're trying to do their best to make sure that they have the PSNI inside of the school, helping protect and educate and ensure children aren't exploited on the internet, ensure children are safer. That's what policing is about. It's not about exploiting young minds as some of these people that mostly society has left behind, but still seem to get some sort of soapbox or platform. And we've got to call out the people who do that. And we still have a situation with our recruits who I, as you know, see all of them at the beginning and at the end. And I'm carrying on seeing recruits from a nationalist Catholic background who've joined during my tenure to see that they're okay. They do have to consider the distant Republican threat against them. I have met a number of officers who've had to be subject to moving house, officers who have been subject to terrorist attacks against them, who feel that nothing has really changed with regards to the societal support for policing. And that's from people who have suffered life-changing injuries because they decided to step forward and be brave enough to join the PSNI. And they feel that we collectively in society have not done enough. In fact, in regard to that particular issue, the individual that I'm talking about, I'm not going to name because I've not asked him if I could talk about what he said to me. He feels the PSNI have done more than anybody else, Brendan. And it's everybody else that hasn't done what they should have done and what Patton asked them to do. And I'll remind you of 15.2 of Patton, if I may, is that all community leaders, all political leaders, all local councillors, bishops, priests, school teachers and sports authorities should work to prevent the discouragement that exists with regards to joining the police and should actively encourage people to join the police service. Now, I don't think any of us over the last 25 years can probably say as a society that has happened in the way that it should have happened. And that's why this anniversary year, I'm determined that we will have this debate. We have got to address what has always been, in 25 years, either just above or just below 30% applicants from the nationalist Catholic background. That's the number, whether you've got 50-50 or not. I want to mention two other things about the officers I speak to. The distant Republican threat, thankfully, is becoming less and less. And our threat level is at substantial, which is, again, a positive reflection and a decrease from having been at severe for a long time. But those applicants still face friends, colleagues, family, who, because we've not had this debate properly, ostracise them because they're joining the police. I still find this really hard to comprehend because of my background not being here. And I've spoken to many senior, influential people in the national community who still say to me, it's 10 years too early, John, it's 20 years too early. I challenge that. So we've got to have that debate. The third issue, and it's raised with me by families, is if they join the PSNI, will they have the opportunities that they deserve? Will they accelerate through the ranks and be promoted? Will they be able to do specialisms? Well, our data shows, and we need to get this story out, that that is the case, that they will succeed in the organisation. We've got to tell a better story. We are doing a series of podcasts at the moment where you will hear from our officers and staff about why they join this organisation and what they do and why it matters to them. Some of the things I've talked about the vocational nature of this work. You are aware, it's certainly been socialised in the media now, that we've done a fly-on-the-wall documentary with Stephen Nolan. That will be coming out in April to show what these officers are doing every day. You can actually see the true blue lights. Nothing's off the table with regards to what I'm going to try and do to make sure that we get the message across about how incredible public service policing is. With regards to schools and universities, I'm in them almost every week, Brendan. I think we have done a huge amount well before I arrived in making sure we got positive relationships. We are talking to Ulster University about having a debate on recruitment in the summer as part probably of a series of events around the 25th anniversary, which I would welcome all parties of whatever view around policing to come and join us for. And as regards work experience, all those mechanisms in place, I want to introduce Pamela to talk about this, but only this morning, and I can show you the email, I got an email from a girl at a school I spoke at last week asking me how could she do work experience, and of course we can facilitate that. This is planting trees, but we've all got to do it, and we've all got to try and turn around, or it's not even turn around. I know people are remarking this is the lowest number for 10 years of applicants. The margins haven't really changed in 25 years. We should be looking at 35-40% of applicants to the Nationalist Catholic community. That's what we want to achieve. There are some other inhibitors as well around the way we do recruitment, post pattern, where I've introduced mechanisms in the past where we interview candidates. We're not sure we're able to do that because of some of the restrictions around the concerns about policing when the pattern report was commissioned and written. So we're looking at all of that to see how we can make sure we address these issues. The 50-50 thing, I just want to mention, I always say it's a stock answer for me. Nothing's ever off the table, okay? But I don't think we need 50-50 if we do what I've just been describing. I think we will see the increase in numbers, and not just, it's important to say this, not just from the Nationalist Catholic community, from new and emerging communities. And some of the data on that's very positive, actually. But there are a number of different cohorts, and we talk about working class Protestant, young working class Protestants applying for the organisation, where we need to do better. And I think if we do apply ourselves properly, all of us, then I think we would not need 50-50. But I always say nothing is off the table. Right, I'm going to hand over to Pamela, and I'm sure the chair's going to tell me off for speaking for too long.
Yep, keep it brief, Pamela, please.
I can. That I can deliver
Yes,
for you.
thank you.
Listen, I think we've covered a lot of the ground. We've touched on the fact that there's an ongoing engagement with schools and universities. Can we do more? Absolutely. So it's there. I think an important fact is that it's not in the 5 weeks of the recruitment campaign. You know, it's a focus that we need to have throughout the year, and that will require some of our resource to also do that. Working through our neighbourhood teams, absolutely, but we need to support them to do that. So we need a team around it. But we have spoken about that, and as the numbers are starting now to trickle out into the local policing teams, we now have mechanisms to do that. We've touched on the focus to showcase the roles and the careers and the developing opportunities. And John has referred to how we want to get that out, get videos of that, get it out and share that. So we've definitely got to focus on that. Through learning and development and Claire's team, we have increased the opportunities for work experience and taster days and things like that. So
I know John refers to it as planting trees, but 45% of this year's applicants were aged between 17 and 24. So there'll still be small trees when they hopefully come our way. And Claire and the team at the college have worked on having material and toolkit and information for the neighbourhood policing teams that when they're out engaging as well, that will all be there. I think there's a real opportunity for us to get this plan, it's already, it's not like we're starting from a zero position, but get the enhancement in, because I do think there's potential for a campaign again in the autumn. So we'll go through these numbers really quickly. We met with the senior team here yesterday with 680 people coming into the college in 26, 27. You go through these campaigns really, really quickly. But we are looking at the mechanisms around potentially rolling aspects of that, or is it fixed points in time? And indeed, making the attractiveness of the career in policing known and showing how people can progress through into specialist roles and so forth. So our own people telling those stories will be the best impact of that. So really clear focus on how we are going to do that going into 2026.
Thank you. Bob?
Sure. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
If you don't mind, just I think, given Colin has specifically mentioned me, I think I should respond to say and clarify that I don't believe I knocked it back or expressed a specific personal view or opinion on 50-50 recruitment. I should say as well, I don't want to give away the year, but I was once upon a time a product of work experience with the police, so I can thoroughly recommend it.
We're celebrating that year. We're celebrating it now.
Please don't speculate as to what year it might be. Well, I think at the end of it, I got a report that said that I was very keen and enthusiastic. So, obviously nothing has changed since then. So just to clarify, what I did say last time out was that unless something fundamentally changes in terms of the number of applications, the reality in terms of if there was political agreement for 50-50 and it was implemented would be that at the current rate of applications, it would present a threat to the business recovery plan. So the 650 that we need a year, we wouldn't be able to get based on the current number of applicants. So what we need to do collectively is to fundamentally, irrespective of what decisions are taken by politicians or anybody else later about 50-50, we all collectively need to fundamentally look at the attraction and the number of applications in the first place. And then we can look at other options, other tools, but we need to fundamentally address that issue because we just aren't getting enough people coming forward as applicants in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Just very quickly, Deirdre, I know you...
It's just a point more so than a question. I mean, obviously, I would agree that we are emerging from decades or centuries of conflict, and obviously that presents challenges. And we do all have a role and a responsibility to tackle these. I suppose where I diverge slightly, that if we feel that the only barriers are advocacy or the threat, then we're not listening to a large section of the community. And I think if we are looking at the barriers, we need to look at all of the barriers. I mean, a previous Chief Constable had highlighted a lack of cultural understanding of a section of the community. There are issues of legacy that we've chatted about before. So I think if we're seriously looking at these issues in terms of representativeness, and obviously even the cultural understanding goes into gender, and we had a discussion this morning around these issues as well. But we need to look at all of the barriers. And I would just highlight that we need to do that holistically and not just look at the issues of advocacy and the threats. If we're serious, we have to look at the cultural barriers. We have to look at the impact of legacy and how that is impacting in terms of recruitment and how a section of the community sees that. And we also have to look, obviously, which I know we may touch on later, around a lack of neighbourhood policing at the front end, which I know has been a course of discussion, but we need to look at all of these issues as a collective.
Just sorry, response to that. I think I've raised every one of those issues, all of that. That's why I think rather than do things in the margin, we're putting ourselves in the shop window for our 25th anniversary that we need to have. I agree, Deirdre, we need to have that debate and we all need to contribute to it. We really do.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to the next question. It's on the case brought by Vincent Kearney, Linda, and then a supplementary from Peter and Colin.
So my question is fairly straightforward, but I'm not sure how straightforward the answer will be. So why did PSNI, first of all, create a profile Vincent Kearney, including members of his family, which is particularly concerning, I think, for all of us, but more so for Vincent himself and his family. And have profiles been made of any other journalists or professionals, for example, lawyers, solicitors, barristers, anybody of that nature?
Sorry, I'm going to bring Peter and Colin in, and I'm conscious that there's an ongoing case and you may be limited in what you can say. Peter, where's Peter? Oh, sorry.
Okay.
You're normally over there.
I know. I suppose the question adds to that I have around the McCullough report and whether the information that has now been revealed around Kearney was revealed for the McCullough report. And can you give an assurance that there is no other information that might come to light in the future that has not been revealed to or covered by the McCullough report?
Thank you. Colin?
Thank you. Yes, Chief Constable, you'd previously said to me that there was a blind spot in terms of MI5's work here in the north, and there has been the admissions by the PSNI and MI5 at the Vincent Kearney Investigatory Powers Tribunal. There's also been discussions about the breaches of protections of journalists and lawyers. And given all of that, and given that so much of what has come out goes far beyond what McCullough was actually investigating, do you believe that we need to have a wider independent investigation to the actions that were being undertaken by both the PSNI and other state operators? Because we know the impact that this is going to have on the lives of families. And I think of the families of those victims in Loughin Island in my own constituency. We think of the families of Dennis Donaldson and others. And given that the McCullough report doesn't cover all of the instances of the behaviours and it goes further than that, do you think that an independent inquiry into that is needed?
Write it down. So I don't forget them. Right. Okay. So firstly, and I will invite David Beck to come in a moment, if I can just, firstly, and you've alluded to it, Chair, last week was the IPT, the Investigatory Powers Tribunal hearing with regards to Vincent Kearney and the BBC. That hearing is yet to report. There was a public day or open session of evidence, and then there was a closed session thereafter for the 2 subsequent days. I want to make very clear that it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the specifics of that hearing, but I want to reassure this board. I also want to say, first and foremost, that Vincent Kearney, I consider an outstanding journalist. Vincent Kearney has done absolutely nothing wrong. Vincent Kearney has not been a suspect in any investigations or inquiries of the PSNI. And I have personally an extremely high regard, respect, and strong relationship with him as a journalist. And I think he does outstanding work. Okay. And I don't think that tramples over the integrity or the independence of commenting about the tribunal. When the tribunal reports with regards to the IPT, I'll be very happy to address any questions, but I think I can say this to reassure you. Firstly, in this case, the PSNI made concessions with regards to the concerns that were raised by Vincent. So there was a candor with regards to the activity that had occurred. With regards to the type of activity that has occurred that was identified by McCullough in his review, I'm not going to speak specifically about Vincent's case, but this is the concern with regards to a number of journalists, is that when call data applications were made and granted around their phone billing. The PSNI applied the codes of practice that were in place from 2007. Those codes of practice did not provide sufficient protection for journalists or lawyers, or indeed anybody that I would describe from a special status with regards to employment, where because of the nature of their profession, in making those applications, great care should be applied around the legal correctness of seeking that data. Subsequently, the codes were changed in 2010, and that meant that those applications were then far more likely to consider the amended codes that provided proper protections under Regulate or Articles 8 and 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights. In many of these cases, and this was found in the McCullough report, the applications for that phone data were predicated on trying to establish who had called journalists to claim responsibility for a serious criminal act, and thus try to identify who was responsible for that serious criminal act. In the McCullough review, and this goes to your point, Colin, subject to the hearing providing us with their findings, it's still the position that there wasn't any systematic abuse of the covert authorities by the PSNI. And we paused Angus McCullough's work to allow these IPT cases to go through their through the course of the hearings, for then Angus to come back to make any additional commentary that he thought relevant for his report. So complete transparency. And Angus, although he couldn't comment on those particular cases because of the ongoing IPT matters, he is able to when he comes back, and he will have access to the material and, of course, the findings of the IPT. And that was always the undertaking. So we remain of the position that the entire process of bringing Angus in was to make sure that we were doing all of these authorities absolutely correctly. This is the most human rights police service I've ever seen. We haven't done things as well as we should have done, but there wasn't this widespread abuse that many people in the media presumed, and that's what Angus found. And of course, we had this group of expert stakeholders to ensure that he was undertaking the work properly. And I think there was and remains absolute confidence in his work. There was a question given to me by Linda about family issues. I don't think I should comment on that until the report has come out, Linda. But I think my view of Vincent Kearney has been made very clear to this board. And he is someone of the highest integrity, and there should be no PSNI examination of him or his family. Okay. So, Davey, do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, thanks, Chief.
Apologies, David, just before you start, can I just get an answer to the question? And you may be going to answer if there are any profiles of any other journalists or professionals such as lawyers.
Okay, thank you. And clearly the Chief has outlined the position around the APT, so I'll not cover that ground again, and indeed the position in terms of our regard for Vincent Kearney as a journalist, and indeed the importance of the work of journalists across Northern Ireland and indeed in any society. I just emphasise the fact that the PSNI did make early concessions in this case, and I think it was absolutely the right thing to do, and I think that will hopefully bring about a swift resolution of the case with the IPT. But the activity undertaken did refer to 5 specific and separate investigations undertaken in 2009, 2012, 2013, 2014 and 2018. And we made the concessions around this case in June of 2024, and from that onwards in respect of our call data applications. As the Chief said, those applications were made in good faith and in accordance with what was the 2007 Codes of Practice that was in use at that time. The subsequent case law, as we've already discussed through the various other cases, established that that code was not sufficient in terms of the protection specifically for journalistic material. So therefore, while we acted in good faith, that was found to be unlawful, and hence why we've made the early concessions in respect of this case moving forward. I think in terms of the Chief mentioned the pausing, if you like, in terms of McCullough and some of the areas impacting on IPTs. So I think in terms of that further commentary around profiles, etc., from my perspective, that's an area that I don't think it would be right and proper to comment on at this stage. I think the right course of action is, when the IPT is complete, for McCullough to return to complete that work, including those areas around profiles, etc. And that perhaps provides that independence that Colin mentioned as well in respect of what had taken place and the appropriateness of that, and indeed whether there are other areas of concern. But in essence, from what has been uncovered, the facts, again, I think would reaffirm the position of the McCullough Review that there was no widespread or systematic surveillance of journalists at this time. But again, I think given where we are with the IPT is still to give its ruling in respect of this case, and indeed then allow the return and the revisit of Angus McCullough in terms of those other issues. I think that's the course of action that I would recommend to the board.
Okay, as a board, we await that completion of the IPT so that we can speak to Angus after that. We've got some progress after that.
Can I just come back on the issue because it's important? It's just to make the point that whilst I appreciate your answer, I don't accept it. Because I don't believe that if McCullough investigated things and the preliminary report didn't show further examples, then we have an IPT process that shows that there were further examples. Then the fact that McCullough's only going to be reviewing after the process doesn't mean that that openness and transparency is there. And one case, one issue is one too many, not about systemic. The fact that if there are other examples that McCullough didn't pick up on, but the IPT did, and then McCullough's having to go back, that doesn't inspire confidence in that process.
So I couldn't disagree with you more. Let's wait for the IPT to report. McCullough stayed away from the IPT cases because that was legally the right thing to do. Nothing that I've heard suggests that McCullough has missed anything with regards to severity. There is no need for any public inquiry here. This isn't what everybody thought it was. McCullough said that to this board when he introduced the report. The reporting then did exactly what McCullough said you did before. You misinterpreted disclosures at the IPT. He told this board that. And then this board and the media misinterpreted what McCullough said. And you're continuing to do that. So there's nothing I've seen or heard, and I'm all about transparency and robustness, that we do everything that we do in accordance with the rule of law. There's nothing that I've heard to contradict anything that McCullough has said. But the important thing to do is wait for the IPT to report and let's see what they say. And if we have missed anything, we will deal with it. Nobody is covering anything up in the PSNI. We're actually, on a number of issues, clearing house on a number of issues, and this is one of them.
Thank you, and we can exchange this and put this in writing and get a view on it. This board does not. We have no pause for getting into a situation where we're making up things or doing what you're suggesting, but we're merely trying to do our job as an accountability body. Frank, where's Frank? You've moved as well. You have a question on the potential effects of the current global conflicts on Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you. Chief Constable, how do you and your organisation gauge and prepare for potential community tensions and disturbances that are linked to the numerous current global conflicts? And can you share with us what plans and strategies you have in place to prevent escalation and ultimately protect our separate communities and the citizens that are for or against the issue?
So, firstly, thank you for the question, Frank. And I think it's important to say we are in an incredibly challenging time. I think we all probably wake up and look at the news and we're not quite sure what we're going to see at the moment. If I start from a personal perspective, I've contacted a number of community leaders from those communities who I think may feel concerned or vulnerable or uncertain about what the current global events and conflicts might mean for their families at home, for their home countries, and any repercussions that might occur here in Northern Ireland. A tier down from that, our strategic engagement team that comes under the deputy have gone to see and reached out to all of those communities that are affected or potentially affected in the way that I've described. And that's on all sides of what's happening at the moment internationally. We apply a strategic community impact assessment continually. So that is a tool for identifying ongoing and emerging issues affecting tensions across Northern Ireland. But that takes into account UK issues, global issues, as well as local issues. It's informed by weekly returns that we receive within the jurisdiction of the PSNI and includes colleagues from Angana Shikana. Direct community engagement. I think the key issue here is about relationships and speaking to people. And of course, crime and incident reporting. What are we seeing? What's happening? What protests are occurring? And the various public affairs briefings that we receive. So all of that is collected. And under a risk assessment scoring matrix, which is aligned to a national tension monitoring mechanism, we assess the situation with regards to any community tensions. Interestingly, and I say this because it's a byproduct of the calls I made, and it's linked to the increase that I referred to in hate crime figures. Two of the people I spoke to, just to check in if they're okay because of current events globally, referenced the increase in hate crime and that media outlets had contacted them to ask if the PSNI were doing enough to keep them safe. Both of those parties told me that they responded that the PSNI were the ones that were keeping them safe, which was so nice to hear, and referenced the names of officers, both in their local districts, but also from the strategic engagement team, who had gone to see them to check in that they were okay. But I found it interesting because it's not always the case with communities for all sorts of reasons, may feel marginalised, may feel a lack of trust towards the police because of relationships between policing and communities in overseas jurisdictions. We've had all sorts of issues here about communities not reporting hate crime. I've raised that with this board, having met families who have accepted unacceptable behaviour and not reported it. I think some of the increase in the hate crimes that we've seen in the statistics is because we are more engaged with those communities than we possibly were previously. So there's a number of things that we're doing, Frank, just to make sure we're ahead of waiting of any issues. But I do just want to bring in, I'm conscious of time, Ryan, who obviously oversees our local policing element, has done a huge amount with his team around this. And Mel has a national role around protest, just to make sure you understand all the different elements to make sure that we are where you would expect us to be. So if I start with Ryan, is that okay?
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Thanks, Frank. I think it's a really great question because, I mean, as police officers, we kind of worry for a living, and this is one of the things that, you know, really worry about at the moment. And the key, as the Chief has outlined, is that we've got our sort of antennae on, so we really understand the picture very locally. So through our neighbourhood teams, that engagement in some of the places that we have seen issues over the last year is really strong at the moment to give us a good sense of that, and then wrapped into that more national picture through the work of the engagement team. Members of the board will have heard Sue-Ann Steen speak with you before, who leads on this work for us with the coordination, not just with what we're doing in PSNI, but also work with other parts of civic government here in Northern Ireland with the Executive Office and others to make sure that we're all exchanging information and we've got a good understanding of what is happening. You'll know and you'll have seen how we have been able to react to issues that have come before. Our ability to surge, our ability to get people to where they need to be in response to issues is pretty well tried and tested. The job at the moment is trying to understand where that need might be, and through all of the things we've outlined, particularly the strategic community impact assessment, which we as a team look at every week to give us a good feeling of how things are, I think is really helpful. And I do feel confident with a good insight into how communities are feeling and what is a really unsettled time for so many, and our job is to help them to feel settled. And Mel, I'll come in to talk a bit about how we're connected to the national and global picture through some of the really important work that Mel's doing. Mel?
Very briefly, Mel, if you can.
Yeah, just to give an additional reassurance that I also chair a Protect and Prepare board, which is about us managing and responding to emerging threats, particularly things like counter-terrorism and hostile state actors that are such a consideration as the global issues change. I am the national protest lead for policing, and that makes sure that we are plugged into the national picture around new and emerging issues, making sure we have consistent responses, that we understand those emerging sort of protest and criminal activity that's linked to the global issues as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Susan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So, sorry, Frank, only Bobby's just reminded me that recently we gave the Partnership Committee a presentation on the engagement team and a copy of the strategic community impact assessment that I referred to. And if you've not seen it, we're happy to share that with you.
It should be in the papers, Frank. Thank you. Going to ask Gerry for a question on the recent activities in West Belfast.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And can I add my condolences to the family of the young officer who's lost their lives. You will have seen, as I presume, the ramming of a car in West Belfast, and there's pictures, I presume, all over. I've certainly seen it in the media, but also Facebook. And I just wanted, I mean, if I'm very frank, looking at it, the first thing that struck me was like Gaza or else Belfast in 1972. You wouldn't recognise the guys as police officers. Maybe that's fair enough. But they get out, they're very heavily armed. And I suppose a number of questions, I've only read what was in the paper. But I know there was a child in the car. Was it the right car? Were they, was anybody arrested? My understanding is not. Was anything found? And was it necessary to do what they did? Because I can tell you, and if I can, I'll come back on this in a wee second, but just to do with representativeness. But the image of that is not the image that we're looking for policing. I mean, when I say we, I mean collectively. I mean, I presume yourselves as well. So it, you know, was it connected to? You might be able to answer this. Fair enough. Was it connected to so-called dissidents? Was it connected to international issues? But it was over the top, if we could put it that way. At least that's what the people and most people that I spoke to in West Belfast are saying.
So firstly, thank you for the question. I did see the images yesterday, Gerry, and I can utterly understand why you've raised that as a question at the board today. I'm going to ask Davey to give your initial response, and then I will make some comments after that. These are really challenging dilemmas sometimes, though, I must tell you, around operational activity. It's difficult to comment in this arena on this case at this time. But what I would say to you is, I'm happy to talk in the private session on this issue. What I can say to you is we are all alive to how that can look with regards to communities. But it reflects some of the wickedly difficult challenges around risk and threat assessments that officers have to make when they're undertaking operational activity. But I am very alive to your concerns, and we will respond to them in a less public forum at this stage to explain some more of the detail to you. But let me just introduce Davey to you to comment as best as he can.
Just ask for it if it comes in. Just, I mean, there are simple questions. I understand, and I'm not naive. There are threats out there. But there's simple questions that are like, was it the right car? Was anybody arrested? You know, and I understand all 3 cars were taken away. In other words, they couldn't go in the cars, so it must have been a pretty heavy round.
Okay, thank you, and I'll try to answer those questions as directly as I can. What I would say is on Tuesday, the 3rd of March, police stopped a number of cars that were potentially linked to criminal activity in the wider Belfast area. In regard to the specific pictures that then were circulated through the media, I can confirm that 2 police vehicles were involved in a 3-vehicle collision, and that was in the old golf course road area of Dunmurry, after attempting to stop the 3rd car, which was a white Audi car. And this took place just after 8:30 in the evening. Nothing was found and no arrests were made in respect of the vehicle that was stopped. The stop was conducted by our specialist firearms officers in plain clothes. They were a resource that was readily available in what was a dynamic situation, and were properly trained resource to conduct this type of stop as safely as possible in what, as the Chief said, is often a very challenging and dynamic situation, but also to try and mitigate the risks around potential pursuits continuing into the kind of the wider Belfast area. There were 4 people in the car. 2 males aged 23 and 21, a female aged 23, and a young child 4 years of age. The adults received what were described as minor injuries. The child, as I understand, was checked at the scene and had no obvious injuries. An ambulance was tasked for those people. However, the ambulance was then cancelled at the request of the people in the car. And they made their own way home. 4 officers also received minor injuries, one of whom was checked in hospital, but there was no serious issues in respect of that. Our primary consideration in these types of operations and investigations is always the safety of the public, and indeed the officers involved in such stops, and trying to bring vehicles to a stop in a safe and controlled way that minimises the risk. But that's dangerous and difficult work in essence. And we are committed to using the full range of lawful and proportionate tactics available to us to investigate crime, ultimately to keep the public safe. But those tactics have to be properly authorised and managed in line with national guidance. That will now be subject of an investigation in terms of the collision. And of course, if there are any issues that we will learn from, we will certainly incorporate that moving forward in terms of what the style, the tone, the dynamic interventions and the way we can do that. But quite often in those, as I say, dynamic situations, there is a requirement to act quickly to minimise the potential for things to run on and risks to develop thereafter. I'm conscious that this is sort of a live investigation and follow-up investigation in terms of the collision. So hopefully that provides you with some outline as to the circumstances in the case, and provides you with some answers at this minute in time. But Chief, I'm happy to hand back to you.
Well, I thank you for that. If I could just expand, not as long as other people responded earlier on, but one of the things that struck me in the conversation earlier on, I have to say, and you're right, it's everybody's duty in terms of policing and representativeness and all of that there, but it sounded a wee bit like the police were saying, it's yours. So I don't want to oversimplify this, but just let me say this. Been around a long time, like others in the room, both sides. It's the people who want to join the PSNI make the decisions up on what the police do. They don't make the decisions up, and I've been involved. I mean, people have come, they've said this before, and asked for help to move forward. I've got them help in terms of that there, and there's other people doing the same thing. But, you know, we talked about the journalists earlier on. We remember about the lawyers, the PPIs, and I know your own personal position on PPIs, the legacy stuff, lack of disclosure through a number of chief constables. The stop and search, which the statistics in that, you know, the use of the Terrorism Act beyond the use of PACE when it is not necessary, and JSA, you know, and just to make this last question, what I'm saying to you is all of that affects people, and especially in the nationalist, because I mean, I can't speak right across the board, but especially in nationalist and Republican areas. And just the last question, see, if 50-50 recruitment was in this recruitment, if I work this out, probably there was over 4,000 who applied. And that means over 27%, you would have been over 1,000 Catholics. So if 50-50 recruitment was there, this could be changed substantially. And over a short, well, a relatively short period of time, all these things take years. And we wouldn't be having this issue. Just to go back in the schools, and it was the chief who said himself, I think, at one of the meetings, that while you do get this, and I condemn it outright, this preventing people going to schools and having bomb scares and all of that. I think the chief constable said that a number of school teachers, head teachers, were prepared to move this forward, which I again welcome. But they do that below the publicity. I can make headlines today by saying something, right? That's not what's going to change this. It is people doing the things people need to do, as opposed to the politicians need to make a statement or need to make that, or somebody else needs to make it or do that. So it's wider. I'm not dismissing what was said earlier on. I'm just saying it's much wider than that. But at the core of it is a person, an individual makes their decision in the first instance on the police, not on anybody else. Is this a service I want to join? So thank you for David for the answer. But I mean the image out there is that's why if you don't put anything out in this except this was a collision, it was a ramming, you know, and everybody's going to be careful with words and all that. But if you be honest with people out there, you get more out of it.
Thank you.
I don't mean honest in that sense. I mean more forthright. Maybe it's proper.
Okay, 1 second, Gerry. Thank you for that. I'm not going to open up the whole representativeness discussion again.
It's about David's point. I just want clarity in terms of Gerry's question, which was fine. I mean, that's the public imagery of what we've seen in terms of the ramming of the car. But just something you said, and I'm just trying to clarify, David, was there a pursuit? Was there a failure to stop? Or was it just immediately straight to ramming? Because, I mean, I think context sometimes is useful in some of these things.
No, let me be absolutely clear. This was not a pursuit. This was us bringing the car in a controlled stop before it moved to a potential pursuit issue. So it's a tactic. It is not a ramming. So the vehicle was not rammed as such. There is a tactic that allows us to effectively box in and bring a car to a controlled stop. As a consequence of that tactic, the cars collided. But it was not a vehicle being rammed off the road type scenario, just to be absolutely clear.
I suppose just to be really, really clear now, was there an attempt to try and stop it before the box it in, or was it just straight to the box and manoeuvre?
Well, again, I just don't want to get into the specifics around the operational deployments, but there was not a pursuit. There was an opportunity to bring it to a conclusion at that time, and that's what was the tactic that was adopted through the command control of the operation.
Okay, thank you. Seeing it's 25 years, I'm going to bring Bobby in. He's itching to say something.
Sorry, and I know you said you didn't want to go, but to pick up on the point and again to clarify, so the figures that we gave, very rough figures at the last meeting in terms of the projections, take into account that even though we may have had over 4,000 applicants, so the next stage in the process is the initial selection test, but we see a massive drop off even on that. So I think the latest figures are circa just over 2,000 in terms of the total number that have completed that, which again to me just reinforces the need first to be encouraging and supporting people to apply in the first place, but also to stay in the process throughout the life of it, because we see people drop out throughout the entirety of the process, unfortunately.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, Chair, I will be brief. Just with what Gerry said, I didn't really disagree with anything. And just to be clear, Gerry, I spent Christmas, New Year rereading the pattern report, and I came back and said to the team, we're just not doing enough. We're not doing enough to try to shift these percentages across a number of different communities, but, you know, very relevant for the nationalist Catholic community. So there is a real acceptance that we need to do a lot more. And the list that you gave of issues, whether it's stop and search, application of certain legislation around certain issues, the imagery of the stop that you talked about that happened this week, the issues around the covert use of authorities, around journalists and lawyers. Policing is really difficult. I always say, and I've said this to you, it's a contact sport. Some people like to think it's a spectator sport. It's not. It's really difficult. And we have dilemmas where often there's no perfect solution. I'm alive to all of the things that you've said, and that's why I want us to have this open debate. That I think this year we really do need to all bring to the table a sense of what we can do to help the organisation move forward over the next decade, 2 decades, and particularly around being more representative of all those communities and how we address some of the concerns that the communities have. This is the structure of the PSNI, the governance, the oversight is an exemplar for people across the world. But we clearly need to do more work in this space. And that's what I'm saying. And that includes the PSNI. I'm not pushing this over to other people. I'm saying we've all got to do this. Okay.
Thank you. Got a question from Peter on hate crimes here.
Thanks. I'm going to go back to hate crime because we've touched on it a little bit during the course of the morning. I think for the second or third year now, the race-related hate incident and crime is more than all of the other race categories put together. That indicates to me there are issues around that. And I suppose as a society, if we counter that, part of it is about leadership within communities. Part of it is about education. Part of it, I think, is about arrests. I don't think you're the prime organisation for the first two, but you are the prime organisation for the arrest side of it. So can I just ask, given the nature of the statistics, how many people are going through the criminal justice system as a result of those unlawful incidents or crimes? And I think traditionally race hate has had a lower resolution rate than many other crimes. And why is that? And what are you doing to address that?
Okay, Peter, thanks for the question. And you know, this is an area, and we've touched on it during this meeting, where we've done a lot of work, but there's a lot more work to do. And I think we're going to get you a written response because there's a certain pattern over a period of time, and I think it would be helpful to set out all of the data. To look at the trends, though, to clarify for this meeting, in the 12 months from the 1st of January of 2025 to the 31st of December 2025, there were more race, sectarian and disability incidents when compared with the previous 12 months. Crimes with a race hate motivation saw the largest increase. There were 488 more race hate incidents and 271 more race hate crimes recorded. The number of both race hate incidents, which last year was 2,260, and hate crimes, which last year was 1,430, are the highest 12-month levels recorded since we started recording the data in 2004 and 2005. Some of that, I think, is a reflection on global events and where we have seen significant challenges around disorder. Because the uplifts that we really see in the reporting were in June 2025, which corresponds with the Ballymena disorder, and in August of 2024, which corresponds with the disorder we saw on the foot of the Southport stabbings of the little girls, and lots of misinformation on social media and incitement of disorder and attacks against our minority communities. To the question around outcome rates and criminal justice process, the outcome rates are never what I want them to be. I'll always say that, but the sanction outcomes and rates by offence from 2007-8 to 24-25 saw the highest increase with regards to race hate crime. So we're now at 16.7% of sanction detections. During the course of the disorder in June in Ballymena, we arrested 100 people and 100 files were sent to the Public Prosecution Service as of the end of February this year, because there is a lag with regards to the investigative elements to put together. And the levels of cases currently live within the criminal justice system is not a figure that we've currently got, because I've asked for that. So we are seeking to try and achieve that. But I want to remind you that with the disorder, both in August of 2024 and June last year, and I think this goes to the relationship with regards to those communities who felt under attack, myself, Bobby, and others at this table met with those communities and provided them with reassurance support, and out of that adversity of what they faced, we definitely built new relationships, and they recognised publicly the number of officers that were injured in defending those communities during the disorder. And you remember we reintroduced and focused on op exposure, where we put out the images of those who are responsible for the disorder, and we put out the images of those who have been convicted for those crimes. Now, in order to try and understand how we're doing, we had the Independent Advisory Group for Hate Crime for the UK come and look at what we're doing. So in December last year, they came and looked at, this is Paul Gianassi, who's the lead for the NPCC, National Police Chiefs Council Hate Crime, and the Independent Advisory Group that supports hate crime. And they did an audit of the approach that the PSNI have had to hate incidents. There was a specific focus on Ballymena, and they have the opportunity to meet a number of residents, community groups, and our team, our neighbourhood officers. They, and I met them, they were incredibly impressed with the approach that we've taken. And they included in a report to the NPCC recommendations on how hate incidents should be progressed nationally because of what they saw from the PSNI. And in their report, it states, at our meeting, we were delighted to hear the exemplary empathy and professionalism which was demonstrated both during the violence and in the recovery stages. This was supported by leadership at all levels within the PSNI, who focused on community adhesion and protection of all. So we know we've got more work to do, but I think some of that relationship is why we're getting the increased reporting. But I want to finish with this, and I will bring Ryan in. Legislation is often a key enabler to deal with crimes like this. So we work closely with the Department of Justice, as you know, and the Criminal Justice Bill introduced by the Justice Minister just this week, which was Monday the 2nd of March, Part 6 contains the hate crime provisions, which aims to build victim confidence in the criminal justice system and support people who are targeted because of who they are. or what they believe, or where people believe they're from. So, in finishing my comments on this, those people who've committed these offences against these victims seem to forget that these victims are positively contributing to society in Northern Ireland. They provide our social care, they provide our health care. We have been to a number of locations to see people from marginalised communities who felt under threat in August 24 and June last year. And they're incredible people just trying to bring up families lawfully, positively in Northern Ireland. And I just want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that our differences are what make this society ever more vibrant and positive. And we've got to deal, and this goes into schools, education, we're all responsible for this. We've got to deal with the hatefulness that seems to be getting a grip of society, not just here, but further afield, which I think is also causing, not just the confidence in reporting, causing more of these crimes to actually occur. But I want to bring Ryan in, because I know he's done a lot of work in this space.
Peter, do you want to come back on anything there before Ryan comes in?
Well, a couple of comments, and maybe Ryan's going to touch on this anyway. As I talk to some of those representative groups that work with and are part of the ethnic minority communities, I also hear positive things about how the police have engaged with them. So I don't dispute that, and actually would commend the police for that. I suppose my question was more around when people carry out racist attacks or incidents or crimes. I think the outcome rate, or are people feeling that there will be consequence to that, is really important. Now, you'd said that there had been a percentage increase that was significant from back 2007, I think. I still think that leaves the resolution rates, the arrest rates, or the conviction rates for race-related crime lower than most other crimes. And I just want to know why that is. And if people feel that there's no consequence, the likelihood of it repeating is going to be higher.
I'm going to bring Ryan in, and we are going to respond to you in writing on this one, because I think there are a number of factors around that which don't necessarily sit with the PSNI. But let me bring Ryan in.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Thanks, Peter, for the question. I mean, I just first want to associate myself with the Chief's comments. You know, when I see figures as they are, I get angry too, because it's people who are being hostile, really picking on the vulnerable and the isolated in most cases. And that in some ways speaks to why it's quite a challenging type of crime to detect. Often happens in the dead of the night. Witnesses reluctant to come forward. Often not a lot of forensics around it. That's why we've done the work alongside the national groups to kind of make sure we're doing our best around any investigative opportunities that we get in these things. And when we've had a chance, like we did around the disorder, we have so much more in the way of terms of visual surveillance, CCTV, just many more eyes, better for just a real good opportunity to do that. And actually you can see the deterrence that does and will come from that. So, you know, very quickly there, when we got images out, you started to see some of the violence dissipate, and already starting to see big sentences coming through, which I think will prove a real deterrence effect around it. There are barriers to reporting. I think we all know this. We know for some, because of experience with policing that they may have had elsewhere, they're reluctant to come forward. There's language barriers as well. But I think really importantly, if you're isolated and vulnerable, you don't want to make yourself more of a target. And that's why I've been working so hard to engage with communities to make them feel comfortable and coming forward. Two important things in relation to that. One, as a board, you've quite rightly been focused on the barrier that's created by a sense that if victims come forward, the first question's about their immigration status, and that makes people not want to come forward. That's why we've made that a priority to make sure that's not happening within PSNI, and the board have been really helpful in taking that work forward. The second is the Hate Crime Advocacy Service. So we in the department fund that to support people through the criminal justice journey, because we realise for a whole host of reasons. It's really hard when you're somebody that's been a victim of race crime to work through that, and they need the village to support them as they come through, Peter. So I'm like you, I want to see more people locked up for it. I want to see more deterrence from them getting sentences in relation to it. And look, rest assured, we take it really seriously. It's really important to us, and I hope communities feel that as well, because it is.
Thank you. We look forward to a written response on that. And this is another issue that requires a wider societal input as well, as many others. We've just a couple more left. Deirdre, you have one on live facial recognition. I know you have a question on neighbourhood policing, but we'll move that to the private session. That'll be for Ryan.
It was just in terms of the live facial recognition. I know we covered this a bit at last month's meeting, and it was said that you do it retrospectively. But obviously, we know that there's been a question via the Justice Minister that it's been engaged 2,153 times. There was also concerns, I suppose, from the Biometrics Commissioner in England in terms of the databases that are used and the uploads of images, that there are millions of images on that database that shouldn't be on it, in terms of a 2012 court decision as well, where it was people that never had a charge or the charges were dismissed. So I'm wondering how confident you are that none of the images that you've used retrospectively don't fall under that. And my follow-up was just, you also gave an update last month on the scoping work that you're doing in terms of whether the PSNI are going to adopt live facial recognition. So it's just to see if there is a view from the police at this point. And as part of that scoping work, is there a human rights feed into that in terms of the programme board? Are you looking at codes of practice around that as well? And also, how will it feed into the incoming biometrics commissioner that's going to be set up here as part of the Justice Bill? Thank you.
Deirdre, listen, thanks for the question. There's quite a lot there. And the more information we get in advance, the more we can give you. I think we need to write back to you to try to give you as much information we can on everything you've just raised. But if it's okay with you, I want to ask Anthony just to respond initially. But we definitely need to get into more granular detail for you, I think, which we will do after the meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Deirdre, for the question. As you'll know, we were down with the board last week in relation to the privacy and policing report, where we talked about these very issues around facial recognition and also artificial intelligence. So in terms of the retrospective use of facial recognition, so that's very separate from live facial recognition because it's retrospective. So the way it works is there has been a database in place for a long time where police, if we take an image of someone in custody, which is governed by the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, so that's been a long-standing process, we will upload that image onto a national database. So that means we can search that database for images, not just from people from Northern Ireland, but people across England and Wales, and they can do vice versa. I am reliably informed that I don't have the figure, but in terms of our images, whilst there has been criticism, I am told that our images are of the highest standard in relation to when we upload them onto that we are one of the forces that has the least scrutiny. But I'll get you a little bit more detail around that, as the Chief says. But I'm confident that what we upload is proportionate and in line with the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. In relation to searching that 2,311, if I maybe give you a contextual example. So what that might be, if, for example, there's a burglary at someone's house, and there's a really good capture of an image of someone on the Ring doorbell. What we would do is take that image from the Ring doorbell and search that against the database. So those are images that are retrospective. They were taken at a previous point in time. So if someone was in custody last week, their image might be there. So when we check that image from the Ring doorbell against that database, it may make a match. And therefore that match may lead us to identify someone as a known offender and arrest them for that burglary. So in my mind, that's a perfectly lawful, legitimate police use of a facial image. And that's what has been done in policing since time immemorial. Policing has been using photographs for over 200 years to identify people who are involved in criminality. It's just so the case now that we're a bit more sophisticated than 200 years ago and that these images are on databases. So that's just a contemporary example of how we might search an image from a burglary today against images in relation to those on the database. In terms of the biometrics, to take that point, you'll be aware from your previous role within the Justice Committee, we are absolutely committed to complying with the stated cases, the European Court of Human Rights stated cases, Cochrane being one of them, around the retention of images. And I'm very supportive that the PSNI adheres to that in relation to the timeframes the Justice Committee have set out, be those 175 or 25 years of retention of biometrics. But what I would say is that legislation, as you know, talks about fingerprints and DNA, but I have personally committed, and we as an organisation have committed to include images in that, even though the legislation is not saying that. We are saying, no, we think a photograph is someone's biometric, and we want to go a step further than what the legislation is actually saying by treating those in the same manner as fingerprints and DNA to show our transparency and to garner trust and confidence that we will not keep any information in relation to anyone that is more than lawfully necessary at all. In terms of the scoping, really the use for live facial recognition, as I mentioned last week, that is something we're doing. We brought Lindsay Chiswick over. Lindsay is the national lead from the Metropolitan Police on the use of live facial recognition, just to help explain to the board how it works. But for me, Northern Ireland is a bit different than the Met. It's obviously a lot smaller in terms of population size and so on. So we have set up a facial recognition board, which I chair, to understand how we might use facial recognition, be that to help us make sure that we have the appropriate governance around the retrospective that I've just talked about, but also officer initiated, which is the third way alongside live facial recognition. So that board is there with a governance perspective. I have asked the members of that board to develop what I've sort of tasked as what would the use cases be for the PSNI around the use of live facial recognition. So where would we use it? When would we use it? And how would we govern it? Because, you know, we don't have the dense population of Croydon, which is one of the areas that's been under scrutiny recently in London. And we don't have that dense population. So we might we use it at concerts, whatever it might be, where we have concerns around particular crime types, city centres, where there's been a spike in thefts and so on and so forth. So I've asked the people of that board, my colleagues, to say, what do we think we would use live facial recognition for? Because only when we understand that evidence base can we make a decision if that's something we want to take forward, because it's not cheap. To buy one live facial recognition camera, or sorry, van, just one van, is over £200,000. And then there's the servicing of that by the officers who will then deploy alongside that van should it make a detection in relation to live facial recognition. So we're a long way off determining if we think it's something we would deploy in Northern Ireland, but we want to make sure we have that evidence base to help us justify, is it something we feel is proportionate and necessary for communities across Northern Ireland?
Thanks. Sorry, just in the follow-up, if we can get a rough timeline of when you are thinking you're going to make a decision on this, and just more information on the scope of the work that you're looking at. But just quickly on the other, and again in the written follow-up, an assurance that the images that have been used retrospectively, that they aren't images that should have been deleted from the databases to begin with. So if we can get more clarity on that, thank you.
Yeah, happy to do so. But as I say, as it stands, the images on the database from when they're taken stay there. There is no legislation at the minute that dictates the deletion of those. Those images from when they were taken will remain on that database. But that's what the legislation seeks to address.
Thanks, and we'll get a written response on that. That's a detailed issue. I've got one last question from Linda on the review of the Marian Beattie murder.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, you'll be aware, obviously, we have spoken previously in relation to this. So I'm going to keep this succinct just to, I suppose, allow for the time scope that we have left. So just to say, I think it's worth outlining Marian Beattie was murdered 53 years ago on the 31st of this month, and her family have been waiting that long on the truth about what happened and some type of justice, if that's even still possible. So the Police Ombudsman's Office made a recommendation around a review of the murder, and the family believe that what has been done to date is a peer review of the investigation, which is very different to a review of the murder. Can I just get clarity around whether it is the intention of yourself to reach out to the family to explicitly help them to understand how PSNI will actually comply with the recommendation of the Police Ombudsman in terms of a review of Marian's murder and finding out what happened on that night 53 years ago when an 18-year-old woman was killed in Athenry?
Yeah, of course, Linda. We spoke about this, I think it was last week or the week before, and I was grateful for you ringing me about it. So I met the family on the 27th of October. They were really, and I understand why, because all the time that's gone by and various challenges, there's really low level trust with the family. In fact, when I went to meet them, they had a film crew waiting outside, which even the solicitor didn't know about. Listen, we want to do this for Marian. We want to get this right. I need to be cautious what I say publicly, but I looked into the case and there are, I think, real investigative opportunities. So since that meeting in October, those investigative opportunities have been pursued by the PSNI. We have got, and forgive me, I will seek clarification from Anthony, but I'm pretty sure Bedfordshire Major Crime Unit are either here or have been to look at what we're doing to review our work to make sure that we've not missed anything. And there is an intention, I don't know the date is set yet, Linda, but to meet the family, the senior investigating officer is going to meet the family. I thought that was in the diary, forgive me if it isn't. I'm told it's in for the 12th of March. And also, I spoke last week to the solicitor for the family to give an overview of where we were. So there is some work to be done, if I'm frank. And it's interesting, bear in mind, this awful incident happened in 1973. To know just a young woman on a night out. But there seem to be some real investigative opportunities, which is interesting. And I want to absolutely assure you that they are being pursued. And obviously we'll speak more fully with the family about those, if that helps you. Okay.
Thank you. That's all the questions. I have one final thing that I want to speak about. We mentioned the tragic road deaths that you spoke about, Chief Constable, in your opening remarks. Could I ask maybe Melanie to give us the 5 fatal causes, just as a reminder to those online and everybody else, because I think that's important.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, it's been a tragic start to the year with 15 fatalities from 12 separate collisions this year so far. And 8 of those collisions were in February with 10 fatalities from them. And it is still the prevailing fatal 5 that seem to crop up as causation factors for all of them. The fatal 5 crop up either in isolation or together. So driving under the influence of drink and drugs, wearing of seat belts, speed, using mobile phones whilst driving, and careless driving or inattention or actions by the driver. So those things crop up either as one-off or in combination with others. And I have to say that we really, really do appeal to drivers and to those in cars to start changing the way they think, because they all think this will never happen to me. And it does happen to people, and it is destroying families and destroying lives. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief Constable, for all of your answers. Thank you to all the members for your questions. And that concludes today's session. We'll meet again on the 2nd of April. Thank you.